Morning. Welcome to day 2 of Dreamforce. Thank you for joining me because it's hard to compete with Michelle Obama. So didn't know that when the scheduling happened. We're excited. I'm Marcus Torres, and this is Greg Ruiz. And we collectively own all components at Salesforce, or specifically all Lightning components. And we're going to today we're not just going to give you a bunch of slides. You get that all Dreamforce long, right? We're going to try to make sure we go through a lot of code so you guys can actually understand how it is you use our components. And our goal is really about trying to really make it easy for you to create your own customizations and your own custom components. And so everyone knows what the next slide is, right? Nope, you're wrong. It's us. Of course, if you want to say, I can't believe I missed Michelle Obama because the line was so long, but the next best speaker was Marcus and Greg, feel free to tweet that. That's fine. We won't complain. As I said, we're part of Lightning Platform. We're really focused on how you can create your own customizations and your own components. And so what we're looking at today is now the forward-looking statement, right? So of course, make any buying decisions based on current functionality and nothing in the future. We will talk about some things in the roadmap. So but let's kind of get started. So one of the things this is what we're kind of our discussion topics for today, but one of the big things that I always get questions about is how do I need to think about components, right? How many of you guys are developers? All right, and how many of you are, say, traditional like back-end or Java developers versus front-end developers? Okay, and how many of you are pure front-end developers? Okay, so a few. One of the things about kind of modern UI frameworks, right, is you need to kind of rethink how you approach doing your customizations, right? And if you've been a developer for a long time, maybe you had, for example, been doing UI customizations with a traditional like MVC model, right? That's different now. That's kind of the change in the front-end technology stack. And so I want to kind of walk you through that. We're going to introduce you to a bunch of the components, the structure of it, how to finally deploy it, which I imagine all of you probably know at this point. I'll talk a little bit of the roadmap, but again, we're just going to spend a lot of time in code. So composition is king. Like if you're a traditional kind of object-oriented like back-end developer, you probably think of like inheritance, right? Well, in a UI framework, it's really about composition. And I'm going to not say this right, but if you've ever, those like matryoshka, like Russian puppet dolls that like there's one and it's, collapsed by or surrounding, or it's encompassed by another, encompassed by another, encompassed by another. That's exactly how kind of component frameworks work. Lightning itself is like the biggest, most complex matryoshka doll there is, right? It's just a lot of components. And so composition is really king to how you leverage these components. And the reason why component frameworks have become so popular, it's because of the efficiency of reuse. If you build a component correctly, you can reuse that over and over and over again within your organization and even outside your organization if you choose. And you're really using, everyone's seen the app builder, right? And it's like, oh, the app builder, and it's great, it's awesome. The app builder is the last stage for custom components, right? It's really kind of the deployment vehicle and the kind of WYSIWYG tool. So if we take this, which is the home page, and I'm going to focus on the Einstein component on the right-hand side. Well, let me back up one quick second. So everything you see here that's highlighted is a component, right? However, those are fully functional logic built in, what we call experience components, right? But when you start to break each one of those components down, again, this kind of composition, and I'll take the Einstein one. Now if you take Einstein and you just say, okay, what is common? Like, what are the common components? What are the base components that make this up? You have kind of the individual rows. Then you have the icons, and you notice the icons are not just in the rows, but the icons up above. That's the same component, just with the different size, right? You have text, right? A bunch of labels where you have different variants of how you think about that text. And then you have an action bar on that right-hand side, right? This is what composition is all about, you simply take the base components and you piece it together. And by doing that, we do all the UI for you. And then what your code is it's actually the glue behind that. For example, when I press on the menu button, I want what comes up, right? What are my actions? What are the things I'm going to then create this, or kind of drive the behavior and the UX of this component? And then of course you have the overall kind of modal. Now, if we look again here this is a Kanban board. Everyone loves Kanban board, right? So if you take the Kanban board in the very top row, which is, kind of those chevrons, right? What is that with base components? What is that, how you think about it? It's simply 3 usages of 2 components. One is kind of the chevron itself, and then the other one is just text, right? It's that easy. But of course, what makes it your component, what makes it a great experience is how you build the logic into that. And then finally, I'll take another one, which is the same from the Kanban board, but this is like the detailed column. If you see, it's only 6 components. It's only 6 base components at the end of the day, right? You have your formatted numbers, which is both at the top and within each individual card. Then you have the text, the button menus, the icons, the card itself, and of course there's a layout, right? And this is how you want to start thinking about it. It's really like Legos, right? But with software, you can take that Lego block that you kind of add a bunch of them together, and then you just say, oh, I want many of these, right? And you just kind of iterate and you create multiple of them together. And this is really the power of composition, right? And if you think about Lightning versus, say, other frameworks, right? A lot of frameworks, they give you certain building blocks, like certain components, right? What our goal is to provide you multiple tiers of components, right? So we're going to give you base components, and those base components are 100%, I want to call it dumb, but they're pure UI, right? They don't have any logic, they don't have any kind of built-in behavior. But then we're also going to deliver for you what we call experience components, things or components that actually do something. So a great example of this is Lightning Path. Has anyone played with Lightning Path programmatically so far? Okay, well, it's awesome. It's so awesome that we gave you 3 versions of it. So we have Lightning Path, which is a fully, it's built into our metadata. You configure it through setup, and it basically follows exactly what all the metadata that you customized in setup. That is an experience component. It is, specific to Salesforce. It's logic built in, all of those things. But then we also gave you another one called Lightning Progress Indicator with a variant type path, right? And that one is 100% UI. You want to control what goes into it. You want to control what happens when someone presses on a button, everything else. That is for you, right? And so you can see how we have these base components, and our own components use the components you see in our app. Use all these base components, and they build that logic in. And you're going to see something similar in the demo later with, for example, Lightning Input versus in the roadmap what's coming up in spring, which is Lightning Input Field, which uses Lightning Input as a base, but then wraps all of the data handling and everything else into a new component, or into an experience component. So it's really, UI is easy as Legos, right? So if you look at, and this is a subset for sure, but if you look at the form components, We have output field. Output field is for those of you who wrote Visualforce, and that is essentially the equivalent of Apex output field, right? Lightning input, lightning buttons, formatted number, formatted text, formatted URL, formatted email, et cetera, et cetera. File upload, which is a great one. If you spent a lot of time trying to get around Visualforce and trying to upload files in Lightning, now you can do it automatically, and it supports files up to 2 gigs, right? File card to preview that file, slider, select, et cetera. And you see kind of the same thing, just a lot of layout components to help you manage your layout, help you manage your navigation, everything from tabs to vertical nav. And of course, all these great visualization components, everything from badges to spinners. How many of you have implemented your own spinner once in your life? It sucks, right? It kind of sucks. It does. You end up trying to get it right, but we're just going to give you one out of the box that works and essentially is used all throughout the Lightning experience. And this is the power of the Lightning platform. We're going to keep giving you all of these components so your composition is really, really easy. And again, where you're going to focus your code is really the glue between these components and not having to recreate the UI yourself. A lot of partners, a lot of developers that I've talked to, they go and they're trying to get all of their kind of UI all custom made. So I'm seeing HTML, I'm seeing JavaScript, I'm seeing CSS, I'm seeing, I'm trying to import some other framework's JavaScript library, and then Locker service says, nope, can't do that, right? So what we're really trying to do is give you as many building blocks as possible so you don't have to worry about the UI. Now, as far as how it all comes together, I'm not sure how many of you have tried to build a component, but each component has a bundle, right? And in that bundle, this is essentially what comes with it. So you have the component itself, which is the markup. You have the client-side controller, which is JavaScript, a helper controller, which is kind of shared functions. Usually this is where you put any kind of retrieval of data, right? And then CSS for your own styling. Again, if you use our base components, they already come with all of SLDS styles built in. You don't have to redo that. But of course, you're going to want your own custom styles at times, and so that's where you would put it. The Aura documentation. Now, I know what you're thinking. Documentation, I don't want to document something. But it's just the way it is, right? The reality is we'll show you, we soft launched, so it's available right now in your winter release, or your winter org, our component library, and we're doing a lot of great changes so that this component library will GA in spring, and we have a complete redesign of it in summer. And so if you put your own documentation, your own developers can find your custom components, or if you're an ISV, your package components will show up in this documentation so people know how to use it. So it's pretty cool stuff. The design file, which is how you essentially extend that component to the app builder, and of course a custom icon if you want. Now, I get a bunch of questions about the renderer. It's a component framework. Each component has a life cycle. Every time I've seen somebody go and try to affect this renderer, they end up taking it out. So in general, what we say is stay away from the renderer. It just, is something we originally put in thinking that people would need to kind of hijack the life cycle of the component and kind of its rendering. But we have found over time that almost every case we've ever seen, people said, okay, forget it. I don't need the renderer. So now let's talk about the app builder. This is what you've seen for like 2 or 3 Dreamforces, right? The UI where you kind of come in, you see the components on the left, you drag them onto the page, and it's an amazing tool. This is where your fully functional custom components live, right? We have our standard components, things like related lists, etc., on the top left, but your custom components will show up underneath that, and then you simply take your custom functional components, and drag it in. Sometimes there's been confusion, like, oh, I want to build a component with the app builder. Like, I want to drag all of these, like, I want to drag the button here, I want to drag the icon here. Who knows, maybe that's something we'll take on one day, but at the end of the day, in a custom component, we can give you all the UI pieces, we could give you a similar experience, but it's your code that's going to drive what happens when you press on these buttons, what happens when you actually have a user perform some sort of operation. And of course, the app builder has a lot of great capabilities, including the ability to dynamically render your component based on a condition. You might even see that today in Greg's demo. So as far as the roadmap is concerned, we have a ton of components that came out in winter 18, over just about 50% additional components than we had before. But the number one component you guys have asked for is missing. That is definitely coming in spring, which is input field. And it will support all field types, including lookups, right? Everyone wants to look up. So input field is coming in spring. We've added a lot of great features to our data table. And the data table is the base for the list view component, which is also coming in spring. You'll have tree grid, right? So a hierarchical kind of data table, and carousel and a few more. And then as you look into summer, the ability to have charting, visual pickers, related lists, and a very easy way to kind of create your own form that's even a easier experience than, say, using input field and output field. So a lot of great things coming, but let's get into the code, right? I want Greg to spend a bunch of time and actually walk you through how we built some of the Dreamhouse app, which you guys can download. It's open source, right?
Yep. All right, thank you, Marcus. How you guys doing? Did anybody see my session yesterday? Okay, I have hardwired today to make sure I have no Wi-Fi issues. We sadly fell out of off the Wi-Fi about halfway through the demo. All right, hopefully everything's going to go well today. I'm looking right now at a page. Obviously, this is a record page, and everything except the highlights panel up here and the detail area right here, everything else on this page is a custom component. Okay? I built every bit of these custom components. Literally what I tell people when I talk to them about, okay, what can I do? Can I do this with a component? Can I do that with a component? Here's my message to you. If you can dream it, you can build it as a component. Really, because it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? But again, we don't have to write a lot of that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript ourselves because the component framework is going to help us, and building with base components is going to allow us to more quickly put these, or composite these things together. But you heard Marcus just now talking about this component library. So let's first go take a look at the component library, and it's right here. And basically, I'll just zoom in up here at the top. Basically, if on your org, if you just put component reference /suite.app at the end of your URL for your org after your .com, that will take you right to this component library. Now we're going to make this a little bit easier to discover and get to in the spring release, but for now, this is where it lives. And basically, you can see over here on the left-hand side, literally every component that we have. And it is quite a few components that we now have here in the list. And by clicking on any one of them, like right now I've got the lightning button selected, you're going to get a preview of the buttons. You're going to see what it looks like. You're going to get markup showing you exactly what the markup is that you need to copy and paste over into your, wait, how many developers, where are my developers here? Okay, I hope you don't mind me sharing some like secrets of the trade with other people, right? I mean, I just said copy paste, right? Every developer loves a good copy paste, right? All right, so this allows us to copy paste into our own code. Now over on the right-hand side, you'll also notice that we have other examples. So if we want to see buttons with icons, I can just click on that and that'll take us right down to show us what the buttons with icons look like. And again, giving us the code. So if I want a neutral button, if I want the brand button, which is the blue button, again, all of these things, again, very quickly allowing me to copy and paste. Now, of course, it's not just about the copy and paste because we also want the button to be able to do do something, right? So we need to know what can this button do. So we've got documentation here telling you all about your component. I would heavily recommend going through and reading the documentation about each component you're about to use. But once you've gotten through the documentation, really a lot of times all I need to know is what was that attribute that I can add to it? What was that thing? And so I just go over to the specification tab where I can literally see every attribute that is available for that particular component. Something as simple as a button. Who would have thought there is that many things that you could do with a button? And again, we have made that very easy for you to use and copy and paste into your own component. So what I thought we would do over the next few minutes is actually build a component together. Does that sound cool? It's dangerous though, because it's live coding. And if you've ever live coded in front of an audience, then you know how scared I am right now. So I'm going to go over here to one of our brokers here, and you notice that on this page, there's some really weird stuff happening right up here. There's some text that just sort of sitting out there in space. All right, this is because I've actually started up this page. I've got a component going, and let me just go into App Builder to show you that basically on this page, I just put this component right here. This component is called Properties by Broker. I can see that. And it's appearing right down here in my list of custom components. So this is the one. And again, I'll just prove it. I'll just make sure that you don't think I'm lying here. There is Properties by Broker. All right. So as I drag that on, that's exactly the way it looks. I'm going to go ahead and go back. And so that component actually gives me the chance to talk about something very important. How many of you have built a Lightning component already? Okay, great. If you have that Lightning component just sitting in space right now in your org, and your org is now rolled to Winter 18, it's transparent. It doesn't have a background. All right, we made a change in Winter 18 with that custom background, and so now that means that all components need to have a background. So this is really easy to sort of add, and I can do it in a couple of different ways. So I'm going to go over here to my code, and one of the ways that I can add that background in is just to say class equals and then SLDS-card. Okay, by just adding a class SLDS-card to this component, let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. That actually will add the white background around or behind the component itself. But you know what? There's an easier way or a better way, I think, to do that, because I think what I want to do is I'm just going to make this stand out a little bit better, and I'm going to start by saying Lightning : card. To use the Lightning card component. Now, if I just close this off, go ahead and take this, cut it out, put it down here below the UL. Right there, that Lightning card has now given me a white background, but there's much more that we can do to this, and let me just prove that. I'll go ahead and push this up. By the way, you'll notice I'm not using the developer console. I'm actually in VS Code. I'm saving right now, and I'm actually pushing straight up into the org that I'm working in. Oh my gosh, mind blown. If you've ever worked with any editor outside of the developer console, then you'll really, really like what we are giving you with DX. But anyway, there you see you've got that white background. Now, of course, what I want this to do is to look a little bit better. So I'm going to go back into my Lightning card, and one of the things that we can do on the Lightning card is just to add an icon. So I'm going to say icon name equals, and then I'm going to pick an icon. Now, the icons that we give you access to all come from SLDS, so the Salesforce Lightning Design System. So if you've never seen that, we'll just run over very quickly to get SLDS and see that in SLDS you have a bunch of icons, and here are all of the icons available for you to use. Now in our case, I actually sort of like some of these custom icons. In fact, I've got one here, Custom 85. It looks like a realtor sign, so that fits sort of into the theme that I'm working with. So I'm going to go use that. Here, I'm going to say custom as the section of icons that we were in, and then custom 85 just to give it the name of the icon I'm interested in. And then I want to give it a title as well. So I'm going to say title equals, and then I'm going to say properties for. But what I'd like to do is to actually list out or have the name of the broker so that when I'm looking at this quickly, I can see, oh, this is his or her property. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this a little bit dynamic. So I'm going to say this is properties for, and then I'm going to concatenate together a little bit of information here. I'm going to say, I need you to go back up to this broker record attribute, because this broker record attribute is actually being populated by something that we call the Lightning Data Service, which can be found here in this force record command. This is what I talked about yesterday for those that were in my session. So I'm just going to say, let's go up to the broker record. And we're going to ask for the name of that particular person, that broker, to be added there. So, okay, with that, I'll go ahead and save this again, pushing this back up. And you'll notice that once we have done so, I'll go back over, I'll refresh in my org, and our component now has a nice icon there, and we're starting to get some text and stuff coming together. Okay, I'm going to fast forward, though, because I've done a little bit of work for you. Because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back over to my code, and I'm going to say, all right, what other kinds of components might I use to display that information? Right now, I'm just showing you some text. So I obviously maybe could just do some text, but I could also imagine a way to show you more information in a compact space. Right? Maybe using something like a tree or an accordion. Would you like to see an accordion? If you don't want to see that, I have no other options because that's what I've coded for you already. Okay, all right, we're going to do that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that this whole UL out that I've already gotten there. I'm just going to take the bottom of this thing. I'm going to cut it out, and I'm just going to uncomment out a bunch of code that I've got here. There we go. Oops, uncomment, I said. All the way down, there we go. All right, get all of that. I'm going to uncomment that, and I'm going to drop that closing lightning card right back in there. Now, whoops, except for the fact that I had it highlighted. There we go. Okay, so what did I just uncomment? I just uncommented yet another one of these lightning-based components. So this is a lightning accordion. Now, the lightning accordion, I'm going to go ahead and take that class off because I've already added it on my card. So the lightning accordion consists of actually two things. And this is very important to understand. As you look back over at our documentation, this is one of the reasons you want to go to the documentation, because as you'll see, a lot of things have multiple items. So there is a lightning accordion, but there's also a lightning accordion section. So many times you will find that we will give a component that is the wrapper, and then the pieces of the component are the little items that go inside. So with an accordion, we have an accordion and then an accordion section. So in my code, I have my accordion. Really, it doesn't consist of much of anything, just lightning accordion. There you go. And then I've got an iteration, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to iterate over that list of properties. We saw that in this particular broker, they've got 3 properties, so I'm going to need 3 accordion sections. So that's where I have actually put in my accordion section. Now, once I put my accordion section in there, I'm going to pass it some information as well. For example, like what should the title or the label be on this accordion. Let me go ahead and save this and push it up, and then we'll come back and take a look at the rest of this data. So now, back over into my org, refreshing one more time. Now you see that our accordion is, our component is starting to come together, starting to look a lot nicer. And notice that now I can toggle open my accordion to go and take a look at different properties and see different information about those. The things that are inside of this, in the actual properties being shown here, these things are really special because it's literally one line of code for me to write this. How? Well, let's go back into the code and take a look. So what I've done in my lightning accordion section is I've added something called a record view form. Record view form is basically a component that we use to wrap things that we want to output, like the lightning output field. So to use a lightning output field, it must be inside of a record view form. The cool thing about the record view form is this. Notice its attributes. I have an attribute of record ID, and by giving it that record ID, I need no apex. No apex is involved in going out and fetching the fields for that particular record. Okay, and using the lightning record view form, I simply say, this is my record ID, this is my object type, And then I specify on a few lines down, lightning output field, I simply tell it the name of the fields that I want to output. And we will display the label and the actual text for you, okay, outputting those. And of course, I've got these nicely laid out here. You'll notice that, we had the two-column layout. Everything's nicely laid out halfway across the component. And the reason for that is I'm actually using another base Lightning component called Lightning Layout. So Lightning Layout allows me to specify the fact that I want to lay this component out, and I want to be able to divide it up into a grid, because that's what Lightning Layout basically is. And inside of every Lightning Layout, we have Lightning Layout items. Oops, sorry. So that Lightning Layout item here, we see it's very easy to lay things out, because a Lightning Layout item takes exactly one attribute called size that decides how big it's going to be. Now, I chose size equals 6. Why did I choose 6? Well, Lightning Layouts are all divided into 12s, into units of 12. So 6 means I am doing, let's see how good your schooling was. Half, right? I'm doing half of the component, right? So if I wanted that to take up a third, I would do 4, right? There we go. Okay, so by doing this is actually laying those elements out, and it knows automatically how to make sure that everything lays out and aligns, because again, it is a grid. All right, so this is really cool. So I've got a nice looking component going on there. But I will tell you, I'm a developer. Know how I know? Because I screw up my code a lot. And the reason I say this and I point this out is because many of us, as we begin to build Lightning components, we're new to this. When I joined Salesforce, I joined 2 years ago, just after Dreamforce 2 years ago, and I sat down to build my first Lightning component, and I built it all wrong. Because I was coming from an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript background where I was approaching building components like I build web pages. Put it all into one big file. And that's just downright wrong, I have realized over the last 2 years. And this goes back to the core of what Marcus was talking about. Building blocks, componentize. When you look at anything, when you visualize in your mind, this is the way I want this thing to be. What you need to do is to step back and say, what are the building blocks that could make this up? How could I possibly break this up into smaller pieces? How could I possibly break this component up into smaller pieces? Well, there's one way that I could do it, and I'll go back over and illustrate that by, once again, I'm going to go into my Lightning accordion here, and I'm just going to take the entire accordion section here, all the way down to the bottom here, to my section, and I'm just going to comment that out, and instead, I'm going to uncomment this line, and I'm going to add it back into that iteration. There we go. And I'll save and push back up to my org to show you that really nothing has changed. My component still looks exactly the same way it did before, except now what we've got, again, toggling everything open, but what I've been able to do is to componentize my component. So what I did is this is referencing another component called properties by broker detail. And all I'm doing is I'm passing the record ID that I'm interested in into this item, so that now if I go over to that one, you'll see that in that one, here is my Lightning accordion section. And what I've done is I've passed in the record ID, which means it goes there. And once it's there, it means it propagates down to the record ID for my record view form. Okay? In other words, break things up into as small a bite-sized pieces as you can and combine those together. All right? Can I show off a minute? Is that okay? All right, here we go. Let's go show off. Let's go back over to one of those properties. So we'll navigate back over to our property here. Let's go back to 121 Harbor Walk Drive. And we have some more of these components. Now, again, as I said, now you know the way that this component was built, because it was built the exact same way using a record view form, output fields. In fact, down here, there's some, again, output fields here. This is again wrapped in a record view form, but this is actually a component unto itself. This is a component unto itself. This is a component unto itself, all in this larger component. In fact, if we go out and we look at this component, this is a component that it looks like an edit form, and in fact, that's what it is. I built it all, again, with base components, right? And I was able to reuse those components over and over again because each time I click on that edit icon, it's not actually launching a separate instance of a component. It's using the same component across the board and just using the Lightning Data Service to inject the data into this particular item. So I've got my pop-ups, I've got my differing fields, and I can make a change to this particular record, save that back, and there we go. We see that my component is in fact working. Now, here's a really cool one. Now, Marcus, this is the one I'm most proud of. All right, this is my favorite part of the demo. So this one up here looks like the sales path. We all know that one, right? We've all gone into App Builder and we found that we have path over there and we said, okay, I want to put a path on, right? There's nothing wrong with that standard component. I love that standard component, except for the fact that I am lazy. How many of you are lazy? Okay. What is the problem with this component when you're lazy? Well, in order to actually make a step, if I want to move this all the way to sold, I have to go and I have to click on sold, and then I have to click on that mark status complete button. And God forbid my admin has hidden the mark status complete button, because then that thing doesn't work at all. Okay? I don't like that. So one of the goals that we have on our team is to take a look at all these things over there on the left-hand side that are standard components and allow you as a developer to programmatically use those or create those in your own components. And so that's what we've actually done here with our property status component. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the page so that you can see that this property status component is really cool, because I don't have to click that mark as step as complete. All I have to do is simply click that, and suddenly my property has changed status. Okay? Do it again. It has changed status. Now, here's the cool part. That entire component, if we go over and we look at that component, here's my property status component. If I look at it, it is literally 13 whole lines of code. That's amazing. If you think about it, it's really not even 13 lines of code, because that's the main thing right there, the Lightning pick list path. Again, all we're doing is passing in a record ID. In this particular case, I'm passing in the field that is the pick list that I want to use. And then I'm declaring what happens when I click on it. And in this particular case, what happens when I click is that handle select. And all I'm doing in there is simply saying, I'm going to go figure out which step the person clicked on. I'm going to assign that as the new status. And then I am simply going to save the record using Lightning Data Service. Okay? That's how easy it is to make really cool interactive components that do cool things. By the way, this did something that you didn't even notice, because otherwise you would have been going, whoa. And I didn't hear any of that. So I'm going to give you one more opportunity. Okay? Because when I click and move this back to listed, something is happening on the page. Do you see things happening on the page? There's two components over here on the right-hand side. As I move back here, there's a days on the market component that suddenly has been replaced with an upload your content component that suddenly goes away completely once the contract or the house has been sold, right? Those are all being done again. These aren't the components themselves. This is actually App Builder working together with my component. So if I look at that upload contract, you can see that this has a component visibility that says this should only be visible when the status is equal to under contract. Okay? So you're able to make dynamic pages with your components as well. Again, has nothing to do with our components themselves, but it makes them look really cool or cooler, because this is really the things that you have been asking us for, is to empower you even more with your customizations through our base Lightning components. Marcus,
That's awesome. What do you guys think?
was there woes there? All right. Oh, can I do a shameless plug?
Shameless.
All right, shameless plug. All right, this component, this similar properties component, is actually on Trailhead. And even cooler, by the way, I've got I'm going to click on my edit button. You all know what's going to happen when I click on my edit button, right? We're going to see the regular edit dialog, right? That thing, right? Wouldn't it be cool if you could actually maybe even leverage some of your Lightning components? Like that one, the one that you've already seen, editing of a record with. I've now used that same component as a standard override to the new function, the new button for any properties. So your components literally can unleash all of your customization. And on Trailhead, there's a project that I wrote that teaches you how to do that too. Because if you're interested, I'll tell you which ones they are while Marcus takes any questions or wraps up or whatever.
Yeah, and so we're just coming towards the end. I think my mic turned off, but that's my fault probably. And I wanted to make sure we answer any questions. So if you have a question, please come up to the mic. While Greg does some more shameless plugs.
So this is the one that will build the similar properties component right there. And let's make that bigger. And if you go back over here and there is an override, if you just look for override, build a Lightning component override to a standard action, that one will show you how to do the new and edit dialogues.
So I was curious, in the app builder, under the standard heading, is it something intrinsic in the component that makes it be part of that short subset list? Because in your other demo, you showed like 50 or 60 or more component. What, is it a hard-coded list that you guys decide, or some built-in property about it makes it be under that category?
No, we decide. So the standard components, I did some of this, but you guys can do it, right? I've never been told that's quiet. So the standard components, those are Salesforce basic components, like our components that we deliver. Now, to kind of give you the tiers, we have the base components, which are the true kind of Lego building blocks. Then we have like the kind of pre-built Lego modules. Those are our standard components. Now, some of them are going to be in the app builder, some of them are going to be programmatic, and a few of them are both. The goal is to make everything that you see in the app builder also be programmatically used, but there's just a lot of work to do there.
And if I can point out, in your design file for any of your own custom components, you can specify, like this, you can see on lines 2 through 4, I'm specifying that similar properties component can only be applied on or used on a properties record page. So if you went to an account record page and you went into App Builder, it would not even be in the list. That's how that list happens, is through the design parameters for components.
And that's something you should be aware of, because you're going to see different components on the different types of pages in App Builder. So a record page versus an app page, all of those have different components. And again, we're trying to open that up as much as possible, but it'll take some time. Cool.
Hi, yeah, we've been waiting a while for Lightning input field. I just wondered, A, why it hasn't been in earlier releases, because it's quite an important feature, whether there's some sort of fundamental issue with it, and B, what the chances are it's actually going to come out in spring.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's hard.
It's much harder than you think. You think, oh, it's just an input field. Yeah.
Yeah. It's exactly, I'm trying to, I got this question from Parker Harris. We go to our executive reviews of our, our roadmap and our products. And I said, okay, input field is, it's going to make this release, which is going to be the spring release. That's what we're currently developing in. And he's like, I don't get it. Why wasn't this two releases ago, 2 years ago? The reality is it's hard. It's hard. And so when we have Lightning Input, which provides you all the extensions. Then we provided Lightning Data Service, which allows you to bind your data to the UI of Lightning Input. But piecing that together on top of all of, not just, actually all of your use cases, generally, customers, partners, it's easy, right? But as soon as we take in all the special Snowflake stuff that our teams do to opties, opportunity products, accounts, contacts, notes, which is the most complex thing that should never be that complex, In our ecosystem, it just becomes really much more difficult. So that's why, but it's coming in this release, and you'll be very happy, I
Okay,
promise.
so just a bit of feedback. It's probably the most important component for us. It's like,
Yes.
Yeah,
We
it's,
are aware.
it's always been the most important component. It's just been a difficult one. That's it. That's it. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
Have a great Dreamforce.